formal. So
Okay, let me just.
are you letting people in? Great. There we are. Wow. Hello everyone, and welcome to the January Finborough Forum, and Happy New Year. It feels weird saying Happy New Year with all the circumstances, but Happy New Year to everyone. And amazing to see everyone kind of coming together in 2021 for another forum. So I know that there might be a few new faces today, and we always kind of just give a background on what the group is for anyone who isn't sure, maybe you're in the wrong room, and just to kind of intro what we're doing here. So the Finborough Forum's been running for just over 2 years now, so we've been around for a while. We didn't used to be called the Finborough Forum, we're the Finborough Writers Group at the start, and we used to meet in the dark cellar under the pub, and we've had the same format all along. So it was the whole kind of point is to get people together in a kind of social space where we can hear from people from the industry who have a lot of expertise and knowledge, and so that we could learn and explore and discuss, and then also socialize afterwards. And the social element is kind of on pause. I have to say this month especially, and with this kind of new lockdown, I've been really craving sort of seeing everyone in person. I'm sure you all are as well. But that was kind of, we'd all go and have a drink and a chat afterwards. So that's kind of how the Finborough Forum works. We've moved it online sort of since April 2020, and it's been following the same format basically. And today we're really excited to have Simon Nelson from BBC Writers Room with us, to talk about the writers' room and sort of TV writing. And there was a kind of a few requests actually for someone from BBC Writers Room. So it's really fantastic. We're really grateful and thankful that Simon's here. So I will kind of intro Simon, and I will ask him some questions for the first 20 to 30 minutes. And then I'll hand over to you. So any questions you've got, hold on to them. You'll have a chance to ask them in the kind of final 30 minutes. We'll try and keep it all within an hour. I know any longer on Zoom gets tiring. So that's how the evening will go. Okay, so what I'm going to ask people to do actually is maybe just while we're chatting, just to turn off your cameras. It kind of helps with bandwidth, but we will have a chance for you to turn them on when you ask a question, and at the end everyone will turn them on and we can all see each other and say hello, because it's really sad to not see faces. Great. Okay. Hi, Simon.
Hey, Carmen.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you very much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks so much for coming. We're all really excited. So Simon is a development executive, is that right? The right title? At the BBC. And he's going to tell us a lot more about the BBC Writers Room. But I think just before we go into that, it's always really interesting to hear how people arrive where they are, what their career journey was. So if you want to just kind of tell us as briefly as you want, or as long as you want, how you became a development executive at BBC.
Well, I started in the theatre, probably like everybody at some stage. I was a very long time ago, I was a child actor. That was my first job at the BBC. I did a university degree, and then I went to drama school. I trained at the Bristol Old Vic, and I then spent about 10 years in rep. So I worked all over the country, and spending reasonable chunks of time in each theatre around the country. And that's kind of where, you know, I've been to university, I've been to drama school, but actually it's in some ways it's where I learned the most about how scripts work, was seeing them on stage, or being in them on stage, and seeing what audiences tune into and what they tune out of. And while I was doing that, I being in rep was great, because you got to be part of a theatre community and a town's community. And so after a few years I got to do a bit of directing and dramaturging, and got to work more with the creation of scripts. And about the same time I became a reader for BBC Drama, and that was, you know, a great thing to be able to do freelance between acting jobs. And slowly that became a thing that I was doing more than acting. I got asked to go and to do a serious chunk of reading for EastEnders. which shoots up in Elstree. And when I was in Elstree, I got asked to work in the story department. And then one night my contract had finished on EastEnders and I was leaving, and I walked past a producer I vaguely knew who was on Grange Hill, and she said, "When do you finish?" And I said, "Today." And she said, "Can you come back on Monday and storyline next season of Grange Hill?" And so one job led to another. So over the years, I've worked in and out of the BBC. I've worked for ITV channels as well, some of which no longer exist, ITV companies. Those of you a certain age will remember Thames Television and London Weekend and things like that. Then the BBC trained me as producer, and I worked in drama and children's drama. And then I went to the writers' room, and I've been there for the last, I think, 4.5 years. And it's the bit of the job that I always liked best, was working with writers and creating ideas and developing ideas and script editing and so forth. So it's a bit of a dream job for me to be able to sort of spend my day doing this. So that's how I've got to where I am. But it all started back in the theatre a very long time ago.
Lovely, thank you. And obviously the writers' room is what you're here to speak about, and I'm sure that everyone here is really interested to get a bit of insight into how it works and what it's all about. I'm sure a lot of us have applied before or are thinking about it, so and I know you've got a kind of presentation ready for us to give us a bit more info, so
sure.
I think let's go with that now. Great.
Okay. So I think does Sue have to make me the host? Is that right?
So
I'm the host. Right, okay, here we go. I'm going to just share my screen, guys. And I'm going to rely on you all to tell me if you ever can't see anything or can't hear anything. So is that working for you all?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
That's working. And anyone else, feel free to say something if anything glitches.
Yeah, please do. Please do, just switch your audio on and shout at me, that's fine. So right, well, that's me. We've talked about me. That's enough about me, I imagine. And I think this is probably what I've just talked about. Yes, that is sort of my journey up to
have a recap.
Working into a little recap on that. Finished up as a development producer and then became development executive for the writers' room. Okay, so what is the writers' room? Who are we? Who are these strange people who sit in judgment on your work? We are several teams and one team. We work as a whole across the whole of the UK, but we also work as mini teams around the UK as well. So we've got offices in Belfast, Glasgow, Salford, Cardiff, and London. And there's 7 of us, I think, in London, and then there's 2 each in the other offices. And we come together when we're working on whole UK projects, but we also work in our smaller teams when we're doing a project that is specific only to the nation or region that we are assigned to. But our core mission is to look for, discover, develop and champion new and experienced writing talent. We used to say new talent, and very often you'd be working with someone and they might be new to Telly, but they'd done 15 years in the theatre and they had a stack of plays under their belt, so they weren't new writers as such. And also when we work with, we also work with some experienced television writers who may have reached a place in their career, but they've plateaued. They can't move on to the next stage, and we work with them to try and develop them forward as well. We work primarily within BBC drama commissioning. And just a sort of a footnote, really, when people talk about the BBC, it's a slightly amorphous description and it means something or nothing, depending on what you're talking about. So drama commissioning is the bit within the public service sector of the BBC, the bit that you pay your license fee for, that commissions dramas to be made. And they commission those from independent production companies. And those are their names that you will know. and there's a couple of hundred of them. And drama commissioning them, they will bring to the drama commissioners an idea that a writer has brought to them, to the independent production company, and they will pitch it. And if the drama commissioning like it, they will put it on their slate for further development. A slight confusion is that one of those independent production companies happens to be called BBC Studios. And although they are part of the BBC group, they are an independent supplier just as much as a company like Kudos or Hartswood might be. But that can sometimes be confusing if you are not completely across the slightly Byzantine nature of television production. We also partner with other departments beyond drama commissioning, children's drama. We very often work with radio drama, but our primary our primary core work is for drama commissioning. We run lots of schemes, competitions, residentials, lots of events across the year, across the country, and this is the way that we get to meet and know emerging writers, and to look at their work, and with some of them to work with them. We have voices groups around the country, and selected writers are invited every year to meet, usually once a month, to skill them up to work in television. They're very often writers who have been working in theatre in whatever area they happen to be in, and they are wanting to skill themselves in such a way that they are able to get match fit for writing for television. And we also give career advice. But our biggest reach is usually through our digital platform. Our website has a huge amount of reach, and for a lot of writers, it's their homepage. I don't know if that's true of any of you. Some of you may be laughing. But that is a place where we include lots of advice, lots of interviews, lots of resources. It has a massive script library, which if you haven't used it, I would highly recommend you do that. There's I think there's 700 odd scripts on there now. And it's I think reading scripts is a really important thing for writers to do. It's also really interesting to have, if you've watched a drama and enjoyed it, to look at its script and just see, is what I saw, did that really translate from this script? Has anything changed? Does this read the way that it was interpreted? And I think it's a really useful exercise when you're trying to work out how to write television drama. There's also a range of scripts on there. So if, for example, you have a brilliant idea for an animation, but you don't know what an animation script looks like, there's some on there, and you can go and you can compare and say, oh, that's how that works. I can do that. That's very straightforward. It's also, we also host an opportunities page on there, where obviously we put all the stuff that we do on there and ask people, you know, it's up there for people to apply to, but also we do host lots and lots of other companies' opportunities as well. You know, for screenwriting for Channel 4, we always post that for Phil Shelley. Many theatres maybe have a scratch night, or they're looking for a particular type of writer, a particular type of play, and they will host on there. The only thing that we will not post on our opportunities page is where a so-called competition where you have to pay some sort of entry fee. That I'm very uncomfortable about that, and there are a lot of those which are clearly about getting the entry fee rather than about the writer. So we don't do that. But apart from that, there's a lot of stuff up there which is not BBC. Oh, that's just a screenshot, in fact, a slightly old screenshot of our webpage. Okay, so things that we do. So one is we do targeted talented searches. These are just examples. We do lots and lots. These are just the ones I could think of today. So we were asked to couple of years back, we were asked to come up with a trans comedy idea by the comedy department, and so we got some writers together, and that came to 2 series of a show called Boy Meets Girl. The Caroline Aherne Bursary, we have run them for BBC Comedy over the year, and we've done the read on that and shortlisted. Almost Not Normal is a show that just went out last year in 2020, that from the winner of the Caroline Aherne. Class Dismissed is a children's sketch show. So we got a team of writers onto that, same as CBeebies. The Alfred Bradley is a radio award, so we do the reading on that. We work with indies around the place. One example is there was a Hartswood Prize, I think it was last year or the year before, but there's lots of others as well. So we work in partnership with people to get tangible outcomes for writers. We also, sorry, just move this. We also do writer development, obviously. We meet writers, we give career advice. The previous slide said targeted departmental initiatives. We're in constant contact with drama commissioning. We sit inside drama commissioning. They're our colleagues and our bosses. We obviously have a pan-UK relationship with them, but also the nation's producers would have one-to-ones with their local commissioners. So for example, our Scottish producer would be in constant touch with the commissioner for drama in Scotland.
Sorry to interrupt you just briefly,
Yeah,
Simon. It's so popular that there's a queue waiting to get into the room, and since you're host, we've not noticed that. So Neil's brought it to my attention. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just
okay.
for them to miss it. So if you can see them, if you don't mind admitting them.
I will, of course, yes.
Sorry.
Right now.
I have to say that the turnout for this is very big. So you're yeah, you've got a lot of fans.
If you can't figure out how to do it, you can make me host very briefly, Simon.
Yeah,
and
no, I think they're all in. They're all
okay.
in. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and yeah, sorry to break your.
Please do tell me if there's any more that need to come in, and I shall.
Brilliant.
I shall.
Thanks so much.
I can just leave that open and then on there. Okay. Yeah, and we used to call ourselves the internal agent. We still hear that sometimes. It's not a description I like, but it's probably as good a description as any. You know, a department actually called me up today to suggest some writers who they could talk to about doing a particular project. So our reach across the BBC it's great to have those relationships because it's great for our writers. We also every year do we're commissioned by BBC Three to do 5 short films, which we call The Break, and it's for 5 writers who haven't written for television before, and we also try and use a new director as well, or 2 new directors across the block. We tend to focus it on a particular area or theme. So, for example, we focused on Scotland one year, and we made it up there. This year, we're making 5 films with our disabled writers group, and they're in fact in post-production right now and should be coming out in a couple of weeks. So it's usually an area of interest or a place that we want to just shine a light on, and that is a way of getting very practical experience for a writer on what the sharp end of making a show actually is like. Okay. Oh, the TV drama writers program. Now this is probably our kind of top end scheme. Some of you may have applied for it. This is where we look for writers who are really at the stage where they're ready to get their own commission. Mm-hmm. It tends to be writers who they may have written for television before, but they would have had their own show on the BBC. So we partner up 10 writers with 10 different independent production companies, and they write an original 60-minute television script. And they've got about a year to do it. So they're in development with their indie for a year, on properly agreed Writers Guild fee and all that sort of thing. and the BBC has a first look at that. So that's been very successful. We usually get at least 4 or 5 of those 10 onto the drama slate every year, which in development terms that's a very high strike rate. Yeah, and so they work with their indie to get the script up to pitching stage. What else? So residentials. Well, we didn't do any last year, but usually when there isn't a plague, we target particular writers who we feel are really ready or right for a particular area that we want to see some script submissions about. So we've done one on animation. We did one called The Lady Killers, which was women writers who were interested in crime. We did, I think last year, and last year that's why the Irish Voices on there. We happened to use some Northern Irish voices early 2020 before the world went mad. And this is where we take people away for 4 or 5 days, usually to somewhere very remote, so you practically don't have a mobile signal. And we do some very concentrated, targeted work so that we get some very tangible results at the end and pitches that have a really good chance of coming through. So I've seen CBBC at the bottom there. For those of you who are young enough, Wolf Blood was a very successful children's drama series about werewolves, and that came out of one of our residentials, for example. So it does have good practical outcomes for us. We're also tasked, and it's a very small area that we do, but it's an important one, of alternative storytelling, of looking at telling stories in a way that is beyond linear television. So I've popped up The Last Hours of Laura Kay, which was particularly successful for us because it won lots of prizes. That was very hard to tell if it was a game or it was a drama. It was sort of both, and it was sort of neither. It was 24 hours of drama, which was the last 24 hours of a young woman's life. And in the last few seconds, she is murdered. And the job of you, as the viewer or player, is to work out who did it by reviewing all the footage of the previous 24 hours. And all the footage was apparently found footage. So it would be taxi cam or a CCTV in a lift or in on FaceTime or whatever, everything. It was all sort of just following her life through the bits of camera that watch us all the time. And then we put some very deep clues into social media. So, for example, Laura would get a FaceTime from her cousin, and then what you could do is go and search her cousin's name on Twitter, and you would find her on there, and from there you could get to her Facebook page, and she might have told Laura something, but her Facebook you can work out from her Facebook page that no, she wasn't doing that when she said she was with Laura, etc. So it was very, very complicated. I think about 3 people solved it, but it was a really interesting experiment in working in storytelling in different ways. And more recently, just last year, actually, we were working with BBC Research and Development into interactive storytelling. With a very sort of new piece of technology. So we do that. That doesn't happen very often, but it's something that we do from time to time. We also throw events as well. Most recently of those, probably the Wales Writer Festival was the most recent, which was a great, fantastic event, and we had Russell T Davies and Ruth Jones and Rob Brydon, and it was just a great event where writers could just do workshops or masterclasses or one-to-ones, all that sort of thing. I think in the picture in the background, that's Jed Mercurio talking to the previous Director General, Lord Hall. That must have been the Writers' Festival, not the Wales Writers' Festival. Okay, but you don't want to hear about that. You want to know how we find writers. How we find writers, we already know a lot of them. All the producers on, I think there's, how many producers do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think it's about half a dozen of us. We have all made shows. we have all had practical experience of putting a show in a studio and bringing it through to broadcast. You generally don't get to that stage in television drama without having worked with and getting to know a lot of writers, and even writers you haven't managed to work with. You've read a lot of scripts, so we already have a huge knowledge base. But we also read a lot. We read a huge amount of scripts. I'll talk about the amount of scripts in a minute, but we cover a massive amount of paper. We also go to lots of plays and play readings. I've been, this year but mostly been Zoom readings, of course, but previous to that, I'm usually at the theatre 2 or 3 times a week. And it's obviously, it's always new writers and new writing, because that's what the job is. I'm not at Phantom. I'm usually in Finborough or at the Arcola or the Space down in Mudchute or the Pleasance, Soho, whatever. And my colleagues are similarly doing that, and of course all around the country. We also bring writers from one genre to another. So you may have a writer who's kind of got locked into comedy, but is really interested in writing for drama and has a good drama idea. So we work with writers like that as well. Our voices groups, where we have really worked quite hard to make the match fit for writing for television, they then start to come up and thinking about big telly ideas through our various opportunities. And the big one for us is our annual script room window, which is the chance for anyone to send in a script unsolicited. So I said we get a lot of scripts every year. How many is a lot? Well, it's usually about 15,000.
Wow.
More or less. Sometimes, I think one year it was down to 13, another year it was maybe slightly over 15. But this year it was about 18,500, because people were in lockdown and had nothing else to do, I suspect.
That they're so high, or is
yeah, well, yes. I mean, part of the reason for that was we when the first lockdown happened, we thought it would be good to try and engage with our writers across the country, and so we thought we'd had the most original idea in the world, which was to do a drama on Zoom. Who knew that was going to get really, really acted really quickly? But we had, I think we had something like 3,000 applicants for that or something.
wow.
But I think we made 10 of them, and they're up. I think they're on our website somewhere, on YouTube and so forth. And it was great to sort of to see that much engagement coming through, and you know, it gave us something to do in terms of reading. Talking of reading, any script that we are looking at, we do a 10-page read. That's usually that's the first sift. Many scripts usually are stopped at that stage. Anything that we feel has shown potential in those first 10 pages gets a 30-page read. And any script that gets through that stage gets a full read. So with our script room window, the numbers are pretty savage. So I think script room this year that's just closed got 5,500. About 85 or 90% of those will be turned down after 10 pages, which will leave about 500 going through to 30 pages. And about somewhere between 100 and 200 will go to a full read. So that drop-off rate is quite severe, and it can feel quite harsh as a writer. Several things to say about that. One is, make sure your first 10 pages are really, really good. But also, making it really, really good doesn't mean that you have to have an explosion on page 2. It means that you have to have such a good hold and such a good idea of the world that it's instantly there. And your characters have to immediately come to life. You know, my acid test is, can I cover over the character names and still know which ones are different? And that doesn't grow through the script. That has to land on page one. Television is quite unforgiving in that way. You know, if people aren't tuning in, they're turning you off. So, and they will do that fast. So you have to solidify that world very, very quickly. So those 10 pages are really, really important. And it also would suggest, if you get through the 10-page read, that you have such a good idea of your plot and character and world, that the rest will probably flow in a very exciting and interesting way anyway. So that's 10 pages. We also have a superb reading team. And the readers tend to be people who, they tend to be, well, they're all industry professionals. They tend to be producers or script editors. Some of them are literary managers from theatres around the country. But they're all people who have had a lot of experience of reading scripts, and especially reading scripts sometimes from new writers. So one of the things they're very good at is kind of spotting that kind of a diamond in the rough. You know, it may not be the most beautifully put together script, but there's something in there that is really exciting. It has a voice that's unusual. Okay, so what is Script Room? It's our annual script window. It's for drama and comedy drama. We do it once a year. It usually opens sort of late autumn, and the window goes across Christmas, so people have time to write over Christmas, and we close in January. We have a bespoke submission system, which we call e-submissions, e-subs. If you haven't used it before, haven't sent anything to us before, when you do upload your script, you have to go through an account registration. That can take a little bit of time. So my plea is always, if the deadline is 5 o'clock on Friday, it's not a good idea to start doing it at 5 to 5 on Friday. Give yourself time. Give yourself a false deadline for yourself, so you've given yourself plenty of time to get your script in. You're only allowed to put in one script, and it has to be a minimum of 30 pages. It can be television, film, radio, stage, online. We're very agnostic about, it doesn't have to be a Telly script, but we don't have your name on it. So all the scripts are read anonymously, which means that the readers can't bring any sort of unconscious bias to their read. Make sure it's the best draft you can do. We don't accept rewrites. We don't accept we don't accept the same script in another year. So make sure it's the best you can possibly do. And we've talked about the readers. Yes, if you get through the full read, you get a script report, which I'm told are fairly useful for writers. If you get through all that, we ask you to come and join our drama room, which is our sort of one of our high-end development groups. Okay, what do we look for? So we're looking for scripts that tell us something about you. The script is a calling card, and it shows your voice and your scope of your talent. Very, very rarely, ever in television, is your spec script speculative. Spec script just means your example script, your speculative script. It's very rarely made, which can be a bit of a blow to hear. But what it does, if it's good, is it gets you into rooms to talk about other projects, because generally a company will want to develop up a new idea with you. But it will be your script that got you in the room. Obviously, we like scripted, not unscripted. Don't need to tell you guys that. We're looking for voices. The script that reflects an original, interesting voice. We don't want more of the same. We want something new. Something which I hear a lot, and it sort of half amuses, half annoys me, is when people say to me, oh, the BBC wouldn't want my script. It's not a BBC show. And I never know what that means, because when you look at the range of stuff that BBC does, you know, we do everything from slapstick for Mr. Tumble, somebody has to write that, on CBeebies, right the way through soap, into serial and series drama, and then onto Radio 4 with sci-fi, horror, domestic drama, kitchen sink, kind of everything. So I always challenge that idea that, you know, there's a BBC show. I don't believe there is. Yeah, we're about developing the person, not the project. And just to repeat, we don't develop projects in the writer's room. That's not our job. That's the job of an independent production company. We develop writers. People, not projects. When you're writing your script, we want you to be yourself. And this relates back to what I said about voice. You have to be writing a script that no one else could have written. It has to be written the way that, you know, only you could write that script. You know, don't try and, you know, write another Fleabag or another I May Destroy You, or, you know, those are great shows. And if you try and ape them, it will just feel a bit sub. Write your story. You know, what do you want to say to that size of audience, and what's your take on that? You have a voice. You know, you're creators. Writers are artists, and the greatest artists have a unique voice. So your job is to try and hone that and find it. What happens if I'm selected from the script room? You're invited to join Drama Room. And Drama Room is a series of industry masterclasses, skills development and script development. So we would do lots of work on obviously character and structure and how that works in television. We also look at the various areas and how you write for them, like radio, like continuing drama. We do a little bit on film with BBC Films, not a huge amount. And so that you have a kind of an arrow, a quiver full of arrows, so that you know what it takes to write a really good episode of a children's drama or a really compelling episode of Casualty. These are all really important parts of the television writer's toolbox. I'm sorry, I'll just pop back. We also, at the end of that, we pair you with a script editor, and so that you get another script that should be kind of industry standard, that you can then take out and shop around. Okay, I think we're probably at questions. Let me just see if there's anything else on my... Yes, it's questions. All right, I'm going to unshare my screen so we can see everybody, and I'm going to make somebody else the host because the responsibility is far too much for me.
Thank you so much. That was so like, there's so much information that I had no idea about, and I've learned a huge amount, and just getting a sense of the numbers, getting a sense of what you're looking for is yeah, really, really, really useful. And also just to hear it from the experience rather than have to read through it is really useful. So thank you so much. Before we pass on to people to ask questions, I'll kick off with a question. And then in the meantime, if you want to ask a question, if you just pop your name in the chat, and then we'll have a little list and we can just ask people to unmute and ask. So if you've got a question, please just pop your name in the chat, and then we'll go through and you'll have a chance to ask. Brilliant. So I'll kick us off. I had quite a few questions written down, so I'm going to just have a glance and choose one. Okay, I'll go with this one. So obviously there's a lot of people here who are sort of still, well, they're theatre writers. Some people want to remain theatre writers, but I know a lot of theatre writers have ambitions for TV or are interested in doing both. And I guess maybe my question would be, people who do transition from writing for stage to writing from screen, what's your experience, what are the main challenges they face during that transition, and what are the biggest differences that kind of between those two forms, I guess?
Yeah, I think the first shock for writers coming out of theatre is, what I loved about working in the theatre is that it was very collegiate and warm and familial, and it felt like you were all creating something together. And television feels harsher than that. And I think something that that writers are most taken aback by when they start working on a television script is the enormous amount of notes that you get. So, you've just delivered your 40-page script that you've sweated blood over and given everything you've got, and in 2 days' time you get 90 pages of notes back. That you want to cry. In fact, there's one writer who is a very, she's a very successful television writer. She's been writing television for decades now, and she said to me only last week, she said, I have an agreement with my script editor. They email me notes in the morning and they ring me in the afternoon, because I'll read them in the morning and then I can cry and then pull myself together, and then we can talk in the afternoon, but I won't be able to talk to them in the morning once I've had the notes. So the notes are hard to get, I think. So there's a lot of notes. They're often quite blunt.
Right.
And they're often coming from a lot of people. So they will all come through your script editor, but they're probably incorporating at least the script editor's own notes, the producer, and the executive producer. If you're in a co-production with another company, double that. That's 6 people. And if you're doing something like a big sort of co-pro with North America or something like that, where there might have 2 or 3 companies on board there and 1 or 2 companies here, that's a huge amount of people, all with an opinion, some of them absolutely contradictory. So that's the first thing that I think is a bit of a shock. And I think it's important. I mean, part of my job is to prepare writers for that, and for them to know that, no, you haven't done anything wrong. This is, you're not getting a huge amount of notes because your script is terrible. You're getting a huge amount of notes because that's what you get on television. I think maybe the other one is you often have a huge amount of drafts. You can easily go up to more than a dozen drafts, some of them with quite radical changes in them. And the other thing is that the script, it feels less yours, I think, than it does in the theatre, because there are so many other creative people inputting to that script that at times you feel like you're losing ownership of it. And it's important to have a good relationship with your script editor and feel that you can talk to them, learning when to take the note and when to push back on the note, and learning which notes aren't worth fighting about. One writer who I respect very much said something really interesting. He said sometimes the notes aren't correct, but where they are is correct. That it's not that what the note says is necessarily right, it's that in that point in the script there's a problem. And sometimes you have to sort of decode the fact that, no, when Simon says, I think we need a cat here, he doesn't mean we need a cat. He means there's something missing emotionally from the protagonist. That's a silly example, but that it requires a little more dialogue in terms of getting to where you want to get to. There's something else we say in television, is that no script is ever finished, it's just abandoned, because you get the stage where that's the day you start filming, and that's that. You go with the draft you've got to.
Wow, thank you. And it's reassuring to know that other writers with loads of experience still cry.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, great. So we've got lots of people for questions, so I'll try and get through as many as possible. So Natalie, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hello, hi.
Hi,
Thanks
Natalie.
for an interesting talk. It was really informative. You may have covered it, and I may just have been scribbling too quickly, but you mentioned the sort of voices groups, and what's the best sort of way to sort of, I don't know, get into those? Is it only through the sort of annual window that you'd be submitted to that?
So in terms of the voices groups, it's several different things. One is it's often someone who we've seen a piece of their work on stage. So you know, you'll certainly find me or one of my colleagues lurking in the vaults for about 3 weeks underground, or you know, or at the Edinburgh Festival, or around the theatres, or also sometimes for the annual submissions window, we'll have a script that we don't feel the writer's quite ready for drama room, but it feels like we would like to have a talk to them, and then from that see if the voices, one of the voices groups might be somewhere that might help them. And it's like, depends where they are, you know. I mean, obviously if they were in Glasgow, then we direct them to the Scottish Voices and they'd have a chat to our Scottish producer. But that's generally how we do it. So it's a combination of work we've seen and a script we've come across that isn't quite ready for what it's been sent for, but we think the writer has potential. So that tends to be that.
Can I ask a quick follow-up? Sorry.
Yeah.
How many people tend to be in the writers' voices group? Is it sort of
it's, you know, it's really interesting. It's it depends where you are. So in London, the London Voices group is about a dozen, I think, maybe slightly more. The Scottish Voices group's huge. They've got like three different groups of differing sizes and types. I think Wales and Northern Ireland are roughly 12 or 13 or so, but tends to be about a dozen, and certainly in London it's about between a dozen and 20 depending on the year. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. Zoe, do you want to jump on and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks so much, Carmen. And thank you, this has been incredibly useful. Just a quick question about coming from playwriting, obviously, most of us here are theatre writers. Two, if I may, I wonder how many of the scripts that are unsolicited in your windows that get through are plays, because I know you say one can write stage, but I'm just interested in how many of those are actually successful. And two, obviously, you're so experienced, I'd just be really interested to know, what common mistakes do you see playwrights make when they transfer over to Telly? Yeah, thank you.
Off the top of my head, I genuinely don't know what percentage-wise it is, but there's always a few. You know, there's always a significant amount, because you are looking for that writer's voice, and very often that's often in some ways often comes across more strongly in theatre pieces. I guess what sometimes becomes difficult to judge is if it's a monologue, even a monologue where the character is playing several different other characters. That can sometimes be a little difficult to judge, but to be honest, if the writing is strong enough and the voice is strong enough, then I've seen those cut through as well. Sorry, what was the second question?
No, that's fascinating. Just what common mistakes do you see playwrights make when they then break into screen?
I think it's, you have the luxury in the theatre that you have, at least for the first half of your play, time, because your audience is locked in for at least 45 minutes before they can get out. You don't have that luxury on television where they will channel flick after 35 seconds. So quite often, writers come from theatre don't necessarily hit the ground running as hard as you often need to in television writing. because you have the luxury of bringing your audience up to speed. And actually, you know, I sometimes felt that in the theatre you needed that sort of first 10 minutes to be a little bit slower, and even, you know, when you're dealing with comedy, just explaining, letting them know when they were allowed to laugh, you know. And television doesn't work like that. It's sort of the opposite way around. You need to get in quite hard and get that story going. And don't get bogged down in backstory. Don't feel that you have to explain who somebody is or where they've come from or why they're there. Just get on with where you are right now, here and now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zoe. Sean, do you want to go next?
Hello.
Hi, Sean.
So a question about drama room. So for the last 2 years, I managed to get through to the full read stage, top 4% stage. So I feel like I've got my sort of nose pressed against the glass. But in 2019, there were a couple of opportunities where we were invited to Portland Place, and there were networking opportunities and Q&As and stuff. Obviously, that hasn't happened in Plague Year.
Yeah.
But just so I kind of feel like sort of made it that far, but you know, there's still that sort of that barrier there. So just wondering, really, you know, when if things start returning to some sort of normal, is there going to be an opportunity for the 2024 percenters to kind of put a little toe over the door?
Do you know, we haven't even talked about it, but I'm going to write it down because it seems like a very sensible idea. Because it is something that we've done every year, and I always enjoy it. I don't know if you find it useful, but it's always nice.
Incredibly useful, and I made really good contacts as well. Just know, fellow writers too.
Yes, is the short answer. I shall bring that up tomorrow.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you, Sean.
Brilliant. So efficient. This is great. Thanks so much, Sean. Catherine, you're next.
Oh, hello. Thanks, Simon. That was so informative. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. It was fascinating the way you're talking about the notes and what might be the inevitable hierarchy in a creative project, because I was pointed to somebody in Ireland recently who looks at people who bring a whole series, there, like the person who's the creator, and then tries to link them up to already established writers. And that's a very interesting enterprise. But that's not happening from what I can tell from what you're talking about. You're talking about writers being commissioned, there are producers, and that's really the hierarchy in a sense. That's what I'm fascinated by.
So if I understand you, so the hierarchy essentially in the UK is that television dramas are commissioned by the television company commissioners. So in terrestrial, that's the BBC, head of the drama commissioner is Piers Wenger. You have drama commissioner at ITV, you have one at Channel 4, one at Sky, I think there's one at Channel 5, and then of course the streaming services have their own version of that. But for your terrestrial British channels or British companies, they will then commission the independent production companies. So whoever's the head of the independent production company would, I suppose, be then the next in that hierarchy, and they will have several execs, and the executive producer will have a slate of projects they're in charge of, and as they get to fruition, they will then work with a producer and a script editor to get, once it's commissioned, to get it into a state where it's ready to shoot. And at that stage, they will then employ a director and a line producer, which you don't need to worry about because that's all about money. And then the crew, et cetera, down to, and so but that pyramid really it's the commissioner and those execs from those independent production companies who are kind of the top of the tree, and it's they that really drive what's going to be on next year, the year after that. That's the kind of the black and white sketch of what it looks like. inevitably it's slightly more Byzantine than that, but fundamentally that's how it works. That, you know, the commissioner's job is to work out what a really great range of dramas is for their particular channel. And the job of the independent production companies is to offer them work which may fit into that commissioner's needs and desires. And inevitably an indie will come along and they'll pitch something that the commissioner hadn't even thought about. And of course, that's the one they want to do. That's the one they love because they hadn't thought about it. But that's really your kind of your structure. So, you know, in terms of editorial drive, commissioners and executive producers. In terms of the editorial drive of the project, that's your producer and your script editor. But with the writer, of course. Does that answer your question?
It does, because I wanted to be kind of free of those illusions that there's any space to be the producer, writer, creator, unless you really are going through your own company, unless you've worked your way up that hierarchy for years.
Yeah,
I think that clarity is very important for me to know that because when you're a playwright in a writer-centered part of a creative industry, you know, that cliche is that the playwright is writer-centered, but this is very much producer-creator-centered.
It is.
As a creative industry. And I think being clear about that is relieving, and it means I kind of know what to do now when I'm going to the writer's room.
The other thing I would say is it is possible to be, I mean, some people are their own producers, but the problem with being your own producer is there's nobody to tell you what's wrong with what you've written. And it's quite important to have someone to sort of to be able to point at bits and go, that doesn't work. And that can be hard to hear and even harder to do to yourself. So I would say treat the creative producer as your friend. Welcome.
Thank you. We've got a few more questions, so I'll try and run through as many as possible in the last sort of 5 minutes. So Joyce, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Simon. Thanks very much. Really appreciate that. Yeah, you were talking about theatre and going to fringe theatres in Edinburgh, and with that not happening this year, I know that I'd seen actually that writers did want you to want to send in invitations. So what about, I mean, I got some development support this year from Omnibus Theatre, and we couldn't then do it in the room online. And then there's YouTube, they did a live performance online, which is still up on YouTube. Is that acceptable? Can we send that in? And where would we send it if that is something that I would look at, because there's no
send the recording, do you mean?
The recording, yeah, but it's live on YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would just send the link to our general email address, which is writersroom@bbc.co.uk. I mean, I've seen several things on YouTube and Zoom this year in place of not getting out to the theatre. Sure. But normally, you know, if people want us to come in a not play gear, want us to come and see stuff, that's exactly the same way. You just send your info to that address, and one of us will try and get to it if we have the evening clear. So yeah, same thing really. Okay.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. And I'd had no idea you guys came to readings, so that's really, really good to find out. Nick, do you want to go next?
Yes, please. My question's been stolen, so I've
quickly make up another one.
I have. You mentioned the importance of reading scripts up on the site, of things that you've seen and liked to see how they translate. Can you suggest any examples where reading the script, it's particularly surprising what you then see on television, or anything which is a really good instructive script in terms of
I think having a look at A Very English Scandal is very interesting, which is Russell T Davis's script.
Yeah.
Partly because it's just beautifully written, but what is instructive is that the order of the script is not the order of that it was broadcast in. So some of the scenes were moved around, and it's interesting just from a storyteller's point of view that even at that stage, with a writer as important as that, there's still room in the edit to move stuff around and still fiddle with the story fundamentally.
So the script that we can read is a final draft, but the edit has taken it.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So that'll be one, and it's worth having a look at anyway as a script, because it's beautiful.
What was the name of that script, sorry?
A Very English Scandal.
Great, thank you, Simon.
Thank you. Can I squeeze in one more question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Brilliant. So I've got Jasmine and Stephen, you guys have sent in written questions, and what I'll do is I might just pop them into an email to you, Simon, afterwards.
Sure, yeah.
And I'll jump to Karinka, who's next. Are you there?
Hi.
Hey.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Simon. That was wicked. Just a quickie. Is there like a forum where one can send their sort of short film into as kind of a taster or teaser of what the main project?
No, unfortunately not. No, we only deal with the written word.
Okay.
Now, having said that, a bit like what I just talked to Joyce about, watching readings on YouTube or things like that. Very often quite happy to have a look at something like that. It was just a matter of sending the link and as an example of your writing. But we don't actually have a facility where people can send the short. But if it is a piece of work that's available somewhere online, then very happy to have a look at it that way.
To the Writers Forum at BBC, is that right?
Writers Room at bbc.co.uk. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I know that there's a couple more questions, but we don't want to keep you. I know an hour is a long time on Zoom. Are you happy to take two?
I'm very happy to take them. Yeah, of course.
Cool, thank you. That's really kind. So 2 more questions, and I will stop taking them. And then Stephen and Jasmine, I've got them written down. So just who's next? Let me have a look. So we had Karinka. Ella, do you want to jump in, Ella? If you're still there.
Yeah. Hello. Thank you so much, Simon. That was really, really helpful and so great to learn about all of these things. I just had a quick question because it wasn't really mentioned that much about audio drama. And I know certainly transitioning from writing for stage into writing for a different medium, it seems like a much more natural transition.
You're absolutely right, yes.
I feel like, is it the same sort of process that you've just said in terms of like it's very producer led, so you have to tell the producers about the script first before it gets made by the BBC, or is it more in-house stuff made by the BBC, or how does that, is it different?
So it's the relationship between writer and producer in radio audio is kind of one of the closest creative relationships in broadcasting, and very often writers and producers writer will work with the same producer for all of their career. The producer will work with the writer to work up the idea. It is then the producer who pitches it to the commissioner, who backs the writer, who promises their life that the audio that comes back will be superb. So that is a very, very key relationship, and really the kind of the only way into audio drama is to find a producer who really likes what you do. And people say, well, how do you find that producer? Very often, first of all, listen to lots of radio drama, and you will start to hear the stuff that you really like. And you'll suddenly realize there's only 3 or 4 producers in the country who are, the shows that you like are being made by the same people. And that's the people that you then need to approach and say, I've heard this, 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 and this. I love them because of this. And that's the sort of thing I do. My play about that was very much in the same emotional territory as that play you did last week on Radio 4. Could we meet? It's not my area of expertise, but as I understand it, radio drama often have a certain amount of work every year that they like to give to first-time radio writers. So they are often looking for work that they can develop. Okay.
Great.
Sorry, I know I don't want to.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Question. Does agents get involved anyway in that process?
For audio drama?
Yeah, or maybe both also for.
Yeah, agents. Yeah, they do. I mean, the agent question is always a really interesting one. In the end, most writers, most of the time, have an agent, which means that they can deal. The agent can deal with all the sort of contracting money stuff, and we've kind of got our version of agents. We've got business affairs officers who they're the other end of the phone from the agent. They're doing that, which means I don't have to do it. But they won't necessarily get you work. They might get you some, but the chances are the work you get will be work that has grown through your career yourself. They can sometimes, very often, help you get meetings with people you haven't met before. Sometimes they're used as a kind of filtering process for people. It's very easy to say, I'll only see people who've got an agent. But I think people sometimes fret quite a lot about getting an agent, not having an agent, that sort of thing. I think it's more important to get your work seen as much as you can by people and by audiences, and gain a reputation, because then they will find you. Yeah. In terms of, just specifically to audio, they probably won't be that much involved. Once you've found that producer who is your champion, the agent becomes slightly irrelevant, except for the business deal.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Ella, for those questions. Final question, promise, is Markella. If you want to jump on, you get to ask the final question.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Simon. That was an amazing session. I just want to ask if, along with writers' development opportunities, there is opportunities or a scheme for people that want to read.
For the readers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. So we have a fairly large reading team, roughly 20 readers, although it's a bit fluid because all readers are freelance, and so sometimes they're doing another job and so they can't do it. But generally, we have kind of the core readers. It's probably just worth talking about them. The reading team is pretty reflective of the country as a whole. I think it's got slightly more women in it than men. It's got, I think we're 15% Celtic nations, which roughly reflects the population. I think we're about 24% BME in our readers. So again, it's a good spread across the country and across socially across the country as well. They tend to be extremely well experienced, so they tend to have script edited shows before or produced shows before. So we do, I mean, the way that we get readers is people send us their CV and we have a look, and if we think that they've got enough reading experience in other places, we then get them to do a test script to see what their report looks like on it. But all of my readers, I think, have worked as editors and readers in quite a lot of other places for other companies before they get to me, and they work for other people at the same time as well because they're freelance. So for example, a lot of the independent drama companies, they use freelance readers because they've got to get through a stack of books or scripts every week, really. So when people want to, you know, I started as a reader and that was my first television job. And it's kind of a matter of getting to those various companies or to us and starting to pick up that reading work. And then it tends to snowball because, you know, once you've worked for one decent indie, another decent indie will look at your CV and go, oh, if they're working for them, then they can work for us. But like everything else, it's that initial, getting that initial first reading job. But specifically for the writers' room, we have people with great experience. So until you've clocked up quite a lot of experience, you probably won't land a reading job with us yet.
Great. Is that
everybody?
I think that's everybody.
Okay.
Thank you so much. We've taken extra bit of your time, and yeah, it's been so informative and so helpful. And yeah, lovely to kind of come together in these dark winter days of lockdown 3 and sort of reflect on what we can achieve in the future, which is really wonderful. So thank you so much, Simon.
Thank you all very much.
This is the moment you can put your camera on, so we can just see everyone. It's always nice to see everyone's faces. And yeah, and a really big thank you for everyone for coming along. There will be another forum next month, as there is every month. I don't know who's going to be our guest yet, so we'll let you know as soon as we know. Any suggestions or